Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a temporary Easter ceasefire with Ukraine from Saturday, and that will last until midnight on April 21st. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Italy in a new round of negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program. And Israel continues its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian population as Gaza's health ministry says that more than 92 people have been killed in the last 48 hours. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belen de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We'll begin with the news. Now we continue with the information. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a temporary Easter ceasefire with Ukraine from Saturday until midnight on April 21st. The announcement came during the Russian president's meeting with the chief of the General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, in Moscow. In the sense, Putin expressed his hope that Kiev would demonstrate goodwill and adhere to the ceasefire, although he highlighted that troops would be ready to respond to any provocation or aggressive behavior. Finally, Putin stated that Ukraine's reaction to the ceasefire would be a clear indicator of whether Kiev is sincerely willing to engage in negotiations to end the conflict. Shortly after the president's statement, the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the ceasefire, calling on Kiev to reciprocate.
Guided by humanitarian considerations, today from 1800 hours to midnight, Sunday to Monday, the Russian side declares an Easter ceasefire. I order all hostilities to cease during this period. We proceed from the assumption that the Ukrainian side will follow our example.
We continue on topic as the governments of Russia and Ukraine have exchanged 246 prisoners of war from both armies following the mediation of the United Arab Emirates. The Russian Defense Ministry reported that 246 soldiers were returned to Moscow, while the exact same number of Ukrainian prisoners of war were released by the Russian army. The exchange included 31 wounded Ukrainian prisoners in exchange for 15 Russian soldiers that were requiring urgent medical attention. On Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced an Easter truce, a decision that he hopes would show Kiev's readiness and ability to fulfill the agreement and to engage in peace talks. Meanwhile, in Hungary, the government says that admitting Ukraine into the European Union would imply a protracted war with Russia and not peace. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán said that Ukraine cannot be accepted into the Union because it does not meet the necessary requirements, given that it does not stand on its own, nor is it a sovereign state, because its eastern border is currently unknown and the size of its territory and population cannot be determined. Orbán also said that Ukraine's dependence on financing from the United States and Europe means that the bloc would have to pick up the tab for its army and sponsor its hostilities. And in other news, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Italy in a new round of negotiations on the Iranian nuclear program. This second round of indirect negotiations, this time held at the Omani embassy in Rome, involved 4 hours of dialogue mediated by the Omani foreign minister. After the meeting, the Iranian foreign minister confirmed that the process had entered a new phase as the delegations managed to bring positions closer on the basis of the future agreement. Both sides agreed that as of Wednesday, April 23rd, technical teams would begin to design the concrete framework of a possible pact. During 3 days of work in Oman, nuclear and economic experts will address the complex operational details to be defined.
It was a good meeting, and I can say that the negotiations are moving forward. This time we managed to reach a better understanding on a series of principles and goals. The negotiations needed to continue and enter the next phase before the expert meetings could begin.
Technical discussions at the expert level will begin in Oman on Wednesday of this week. The experts will have more time to go into the details, to design a framework for an agreement. And then we will meet again in Oman next Saturday to review the results of the experts' work, to see how close we are to reaching an agreement.
And U.S. President Donald Trump is considering to remove the head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, for his criticism of the tariffs imposed by Washington. Jerome Powell opted not to lower interest rates and warned that it is highly likely that the tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump would increase inflation and slow down the country's economic growth. On April 2nd, the U.S. head of state announced the imposition of tariffs on almost all imported products, creating a global trade war. In view of the negative impact on the international economy, Trump ordered a 90-day pause on this measure for imports from countries that have entered into trade negotiations with the White House. While in Canada, only 10 days before the elections, polling stations have started to operate throughout the country, receiving citizens who wish to vote in advance. Canadians are able to vote early from April 18th to the 21st at their assigned polling stations to elect members of the House of Commons for the 45th session of the National Assembly. All Canadians over the age of 18 can also vote by mail until April 22nd. And according to polls and recent debates between the main candidates, the leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, remains the favorite so far. Carney maintains his speech to defend Canada against the tariffs imposed by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Now we have a short break coming up, but first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. We continue with more information. Israel continues its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian population, as the Gaza's health ministry said that more than 92 people had been killed in the last 48 hours. Israeli drone attacks have targeted residential areas in the Shuhaya and Tufa neighborhoods of Gaza City, as well as Beit Hanun in northern Gaza, with reports stating that at least 52 people had been killed by Israeli attacks in the enclave since dawn. Also, several wounded Gazan children were taken to the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis following an Israeli attack on Al-Mawasi area, established as an alleged humanitarian zone. Israel has killed over 51,000 people since the start of the genocidal campaign on October 7, 2023. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, the Secretary General of the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, stated that the resistance would not accept the calls for disarmament made by the Israeli occupation. During a speech broadcast, he announced that the Israeli army continues its attacks despite the ceasefire agreement. According to Qassem's statement, the Israeli regime's talks of disarming the Lebanese resistance comes in the context of plans to occupy most of the Lebanese territory as part of the Zionist expansionist project and aim at weakening Lebanon. The leader also highlighted that the resistance in the territory has made great achievements in the last 40 years, assuring that thanks to it, the Israeli occupiers were expelled from Lebanon in the year 2000.
نحن لن نسمح لأحد We will not allow anyone to disarm Hezbollah or disarm the resistance because Hezbollah is one resistance. The idea of disarmament is out of the dictionary. Does anyone expect a strategic defense dialogue while warplanes are flying over our heads? The occupation is in the south, and the U.S. is applying pressure so that the discussion takes place under coercion and according to imposed dictates? This is considered not a dialogue. This is considered surrender.
And the death toll from recent U.S. airstrikes in the port of Ras Isa in western Yemen has risen to 80, with 150 wounded. According to the Public Health Office in Hodeidah Governorate, these are preliminary figures and are expected to rise as search and rescue efforts continue. This new offensive has become the most lethal since the United States began its operations against Yemen under Donald Trump's administration. The United States Central Command, CENTCOM, justified this operation as an attempt to cut off illegal revenues, which, according to Washington, finance Houthi actions in the region. However, the Yemeni authorities denounced that the real objective is to weaken their resistance. And humanitarian organizations are urging the international community to put pressure on Israel to stop its siege against residential areas in Syria. Human rights groups have called on multilateral organizations to protect civilian victims from the Zionist onslaught of the last few months. They have also denounced that land incursions by the Tel Aviv army are in breach of the core principles of the United Nations Charter. Therefore, they demand that the parties to respect international humanitarian law to ensure a cessation of violence and to prevent a security crisis in the region. In other news, in Ecuador, the state-owned company Petroecuador confirmed that a pipeline rupture caused a new oil spill on a highway in the Amazonian province of Orellana. Authorities confirmed the incident hours after it began due to citizens posting several videos showing how the crude oil was spreading across the road and nearby areas. Petroecuador stated that the pipeline damage occurred due to the impact of a lowboy-type vehicle that was traveling through the area. Currently, Petroecuador and the Ministry of the Environment are assessing the magnitude of the oil spill and its potential consequences. On March 13th, another rupture occurred near the municipality of Quininde that left 150,000 people in need of humanitarian assistance. We have a second short break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverages, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Saturday, Venezuela hosted celebrations for the 215th anniversary of the declaration of its independence, the first step towards the nation's independence. In the Venezuelan capital, Caracas, Mayor Carmen Melendez and the head of the government in the capital district, Naum Fernandez, along with part of the diplomatic corps accredited to the country, laid a wreath before the statue of Liberator Simón Bolívar. This ceremony preceded a solemn session at the Santa Rosa de Lima Chapel, which included a theatrical representation about the women who sacrificed their lives to free Venezuela from the Spanish Empire. And the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, declared a sanitary emergency due to yellow fever and activated an integral national plan for massive vaccination. Petro explained that in 2 months, the entire Colombian population must be vaccinated and insisted that health and education personnel, as well as soldiers, must be prioritized. At least 20 people have lost their lives since the beginning of the year due to the increase in yellow fever cases, which has led the government to declare this emergency. The spread of the disease is related to climatic conditions, since high temperatures allow mosquitoes to ascend the mountains and reach the cities. Meanwhile, in Ecuador, the president of the Citizens Revolution Movement, Luisa González, reiterated her denunciation of electoral fraud after the second round of elections in the country. The statement comes after a report of the observers of the Organization of American States, which points out identified inconveniences, for example, that the ink used to mark the ballots was transferred between the political options. This generated confusion in the interpretation of the vote and, in some cases, derived in their annulment. Luisa González declared that the Citizens' Revolution would present evidence of the manipulation of the voting records. From Ecuador and other parts of the world, experts have pointed out that the elections were held without minimum democratic conditions or guarantees. In Cuba, the city of Santiago de Cuba prepares to host a new edition of the Caribbean Festival, also known as the Fire Party, from July 3rd to the 9th this year. The event, considered one of the most important in Cuba's cultural calendar, brings together representatives of Caribbean popular cultures in a celebration of traditions, art, and regional thought. This year's edition will be dedicated to Curaçao and will feature activities such as the International Colloquium, The Caribbean That Unites Us, where participants will discuss the history, identity, and culture of Caribbean peoples. Among the festival's most notable events are the Serpent Parade, the Cimarron Tribute in El Cobre, and the Burning of the Devil, a closing ceremony symbolizing spiritual renewal. And a group integrated by Latin American migrants living in Brazil visited Colombia for the first time, accompanied by the rhythms and cumbia airs, an example of integration. Our correspondent Hernán Tobar with the details.
They came to Colombia from Sao Paulo, Brazil. With their instruments and folkloric sounds, they retake musical elements of the cumbia, a rhythm that has crossed the entire South American continent.
The essence of Cumbia Calavera is in our sacred heart, the Latin American heart, and the cumbia that was born in Colombia and that crossed everything and became another story of the cumbia, and now we are telling another story. We came to Colombia to know the cumbia because there is not a Colombian member in our group yet, but here we are researching. The cumbia created and still brings a message of Latin American integration, of peace, of being together. It's a very nice rhythm.
Their costumes are inspired by the iconography of the Mexican Day of the Dead, and their members represent an amalgam of nationalities. Migrants who reside in Sao Paulo from Argentina, Chile, Cuba, Uruguay, and Togo, an aspect that nourishes Cumbia Calavera both culturally and musically.
No hay cumbia brasileña, ¿no? El idioma es una frontera más.
There is no Brazilian cumbia. The language is another frontier, so the fact that we are migrants and that we play wind and percussion instruments with that rhythm helps us to integrate in some way, to be in community, because the language, as I said, is a frontier, so the rest of South America speaks Spanish, so we communicate in Spanish, no matter if someone has an Uruguayan accent, Argentinian accent. In the end, cumbia brings us together, art brings us together and makes us show our culture.
Agrupación que fundada en el año 2016 participa con gran suceso en el Carnaval de la Calle.
The group, founded in 2016, participated with great success in the Carnival of Sao Paulo Street in 2017, which earned them local and international recognition, maintaining their iconographic attire adorned with flowers and skull makeup, and the instrumental contribution that gives their music expressive force, relevance, and a capacity of remembrance in the listener.
Creo que el desafío y lo genial fue poder también fusionar, tocar cumbia.
I think the challenge and the great thing was to be able to play cumbia, to understand many places where that cumbia comes from. Because we have Colombian cumbia, and also, for example, we mix with Andean rhythms. There are things from Argentine cumbia and things from Brazilian rhythms placed within cumbia. So it's like that, a great commonplace that we have.
Their presentations recreate a party atmosphere using circus elements, providing the audience with musical magic and a carnival atmosphere.
Hernán Darío Tobar Gaitán, teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.